Hey, Seth David here from the world famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, bringing to you another spectacular Guide to the Galaxy article and video on mastering work-related notes with Bulletproof Notion. And just a bit of background. Many of you who have been following me, subscribed to me, what have you, know that for a long time now I've had my bulletproof bookkeeping, which is based on the idea that your books are impenetrable, meaning you can prove every number. And similarly, as I've always done since I started Nerd Enterprises, I've always taken anything sort of, that's not the accounting, but it's tangent to the accounting. And I've taken anything I've done along those lines in terms of managing information, managing productivity, managing notes and information and knowledge, the stuff that's in my head. And anything I found effective for my own business, I've turned around and taught it to you, because if it's effective for my business, my assumption is it's effective for yours as well. And that is the whole impetus behind Bulletproof Notion. You're seeing an example of the hub that I've created, the most recent iteration of it on my screen as of today's recording. So what I want to do is I want to show you something, a bunch of things actually, inspired by something I saw on the Notion subreddit where somebody was asking about how people manage notes. So I thought it would be a useful way to illustrate, I thought it would be useful to illustrate for you how I manage notes, among other things, and that are related in my whole system, right? So first, let's talk about the kinds of notes that we might want to keep track of in our business. I think it's important to start there. So obviously research, any information that you're needing to keep track of by way of research. Maybe you're researching, if I'm speaking to my accounting and bookkeeping friends, you might be researching the rules for how to handle the accounting for a certain type of transaction, for a certain type of industry, and so on. So plenty of use cases for research-based note-taking there. Project plans and updates, you're going to see later on in the video. I'm going to show you where I have a separate area within each client for any projects that you're managing for that client. So any project-related notes are going to be associated with that, but you'll also see how they'll be accessible in a global notes database as well, which, by the way, gives you a clue about the fact that this whole system is based on a geometric system as opposed to a linear system. Most of the apps that you're using are very, very linear in nature. You have folders and subfolders, rows and sub-items and so on. So this is, you're going to see, you can access information from any number of different ways and any number of different places, which makes it much easier to retrieve information when you need it. And that's the whole name of the game. It's about optimizing everything for retrieval here. Of course, there's meeting agendas and notes that you'll take. So the agenda itself, what you're going to talk about, and then, of course, in the same spot, you'll take notes based on that meeting, and you'll want to outline, to-dos and action items and things like that. Those things will tend to get peeled off from the notes into tasks, and in a good system, you'll be able to link between the related task and the note that it came from. Training and onboarding notes for both clients and employees that you might onboard into your organization. Brainstorming sessions. This may be something you do by yourself. Writing is thinking, and I'm going to talk about that for a minute or two. Feedback and performance reviews, of course, that you might do with your employees. Technical documentation, event planning, process documentation, market and competitor research, strategic planning, and customer support and service notes. You can probably increase this list ad infinitum. And one thing I want to mention here before I forget is that a number of these I would not put in a notes database. Anything that has to do with outlining and documenting processes should go in their own database, which is where you track all your SOPs, right, or your standard operating procedures. So it's really a very specialized kind of note, and I would create a separate home for those kind of notes. I wouldn't mingle them together with all the other kinds of notes that I just mentioned. Okay, so in this subreddit, and I'll show it to you here on my screen, this person asked this question. I'm curious to learn how folks are dealing with work-related notes. So you use Notion to take work-related notes. How do you get it managed and under control? One topic a doc or a giant doc for everything? Do you find it efficient, easy to manage, and look for the note when you need it? So right here, his question is really begging for the optimized for retrieval. And then what are other better alternatives, presumably meaning versus Notion, right? So that's where this is coming from. This is linked up in my article in case you wanted to check it out for yourself. So that's what we're going to talk about. I want to break down these questions. So the first question is obvious. Do I use Notion? I definitely use Notion to take work-related notes. No question, in my opinion. There's no better tool out there for that purpose. Now, how do we get it managed and under control? That's going to be the topic of the whole rest of this video. And do I find it efficient, easy to manage, and to find the notes when I need it? Absolutely. But a lot of that has to do not with the app, but with the system I use where I've applied the app. In other words, I have a system for organizing this information. In fact, let me back up to take a page right out of David Allen's Getting Things Done. I have a system that enables me to capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage with every note I ever have to take in a system I can trust. That's what you're seeing here. What are other better alternatives? I'm going to skip that question because, as I just mentioned, I don't believe there are better alternatives. I've played with so many other tools for note-taking purposes. This is so leaps and bounds better than anything else I've ever used for the purpose. Plus, I use it for pretty much everything at this point, as you'll probably notice if you follow along with me and watch the stuff that I talk about here online. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to take a top-down approach, right? So, in other words, starting at the highest level, and in this case, it happens to be the most recent level, which is here where I've got my notebooks. Now, a little bit of background on why I did this. So I recently discovered a really slick tool called, it's an extension, a browser extension called Save to Notion. Up until this, my only complaint about Notion was that there was no good way of getting emails into Notion. Notion has its own web clipper, which I've now hidden because I'm using Save to Notion in its stead. But Notion's web clipper, for whatever reason, won't clip emails. I've always assumed it was for security reasons, but along comes Save to Notion, which I have up here in my browser as an extension. And not only does it beautifully clip emails, but it also beautifully clips anything else on the web that you ever might encounter. So this made a big difference in terms of lots of emails that I get, and a lot of the emails that I get that I want to, sort of save as reference items are based on, read later type stuff. I get emailed a lot of emails from subscriptions I have. For example, probably one of the most voluminous ones where I get a lot of emails each day is from The Economist. I love reading The Economist, and you can see I've got that notebook here. So once I discovered this extension, the volume of notes I was saving into Notion increased dramatically and very quickly, and so that's what inspired me to create this notebooks sort of dimension or layer to, at a very high level, just group all the notes. And let me just quickly speak to some of this so you understand exactly how I'm thinking about this, and I'll also put the caveat on this that just because this is how I'm doing it doesn't mean this is how you have to do it. This is purely a have it your way kind of thing. You do what works for you. You do what you need to do to make sure that, once again, ultimately, you can retrieve everything, that everything is optimized for retrieval. In other words, when I'm looking for something, I can find it in 30 seconds or less, okay? Now, the idea here is not to duplicate efforts. So just jumping over to this notebook that's called Client Meetings and Notes. You might be inclined to create a separate notebook for every client. There's no need for that, in my opinion, because I have a whole area for each client, and then I can go into each client and access those notes that are specific to that client. So this was meant to just create a bigger picture grouping of all my notes for all my clients. And once I'm in here, I can certainly group it, filter it, whatever I need to do if I want to, while I'm looking at it from this vantage point, if I want to chisel it down to one particular client. This also underscores what I said earlier about a geometric system. I can access these notes from here. I can also access the same notes for a certain client by going into that client's area and going into their notes. And I'll show you that later on in the video. Okay, Aaron Rashkin is my fitness coach, and he's also a master marketer. I went to high school with him. I've known him for years, and he sends a lot of emails that I save because I want to study them. He's a master copywriter, and I love learning. I've learned so much just by watching what he does, so I save his emails into this notebook. Articles. So, for example, this very video that I'm doing and the related article, that you would find in here, along with any other articles I create going forward, where I want to attach notes related to that article. I discuss client meetings and notes. Dan Coe is another guy who I love to follow for copywriting purposes. I love the way he writes, and also he writes specifically about how to write copy and just really, really interesting, well-written stuff. Kajabi Info. Kajabi is the platform that my site is built on, and I like to save information about new features that come out, and anything having to do with learning Kajabi or just any information I want to be able to keep track of about Kajabi is going to go into here. This is for obviously general marketing information that I capture from whatever source, and I want to keep it in here. And mind you, don't think that the only way I ever create these notes or capture them is through the Save to Notion clipper. That's just the most recent and a very one that I'm using a lot, obviously. But I can easily just go into these notebooks and create a new note and take notes. It might be based on an article I'm reading, so in that case, I'd probably clip the article off the web, add it to the marketing notebook if it's an article about marketing, and then take my notes about what I learned reading that article and specifically how I might intend to apply that knowledge into something specific that I'm going to do. Nerd Enterprises admin is obviously administrative stuff, right? And then I do keep a separate notebook for internal meetings versus client meetings, right? For, I think, obvious reasons. I clearly want to keep those clear and separated from everything else. The Notion notebook, similar to my Kajabi notebook, is where I capture and store information related to learning Notion, learning about features, so on and so forth. Personal is personal. Productivity, this is just stuff I've captured about general productivity that I want to study. These are project-related notes specifically. Receipts, I get emailed a lot of receipts. I don't do paper, and so I started a notebook for that, so that when I get an email form of a receipt, I can add it here and access it quickly and easily from anywhere, from a mobile device. The Daily Stoic and Daily Dad are also email subscriptions I get that I like to read for educational and learning purposes. The Economist, and then this is a notebook I created based partly on a book that I'm reading that many of you know. It's Ron Baker and Paul Dunn's Time's Up, the subscription business model. But I wanted to create a notebook, so I have notes that I'm taking based on reading that book, but this is more a bigger picture information I want to capture that will help inform me about how I want to develop and then teach others about how to build a subscription-based business model. So that's a pretty good drill down, I think, on all of my notebooks and what they're all about. Next thing I want to talk about are templates. So if we go back to that list that I mentioned earlier of the different types of notes that you might want to take, any one of those could become a template that, using an app like Notion, I have the capability to develop templates. All a template really is it's a page with a predefined layout. So for example, the next time I find myself in a meeting and I'm like, oh crap, I forgot to set up my meeting notes for this, in a click, I already have a template for meeting agenda and notes that I can, open up and make a copy of, assign it to the client, and so on. So real quick, I'll jump into a sample here of my notes. So this is my global notes database. This is what I was talking about earlier, where this is everything. This is every note I've ever taken for any client, project, everything that's in every one of those notebooks. It's all here. There's no filters on this, in other words, right? Now, if I go over here, I've got a few templates. I could create a lot more, but right now I've got the obvious one, the meeting agenda templates. I often use general notes. Notice that's the default because most of the time I don't need a specific layout, right? And then I have a webinar template. That's something very specific that's based on a detailed structure that I use when I develop a webinar. And then this is a template I created specifically for the emails that I capture. So this is brand new, based on discovering my new extension that I'm in love with called Save to Notion, okay? So this is an idea. If I open up the meeting agenda template, it's inspired by an app that I was introduced to only weeks before they went out of business, which was so sad because it was such a slick, the app was strictly for meeting notes, and I just loved the way they laid it out. So it was kind of like this, where you have the agenda items here on the left. On the right, you indicate the follow-up or action items for each person. Notion lets you create buttons like this, so I can quickly click next item, and it just quickly duplicates, a preset block is what they're called, right? So it's a click instead of typing a few commands to get it done, right? It saves keystrokes or whatever. Anyway, so this is the meeting agenda template. So if I were to create a new note and click on this, that is the layout I would get. And then, of course, I could rename it, assign it to the client, and so on and so forth. Okay. So now templates is, I mentioned before that I was going to do a top-down approach. Templates is kind of going down to the bottom layer, but I wanted you to see this in terms of the bigger picture as I laid it out earlier, as far as the different types of notes you might want to take. And we're using a tool like Notion for this, I have the ability to create those templates. And backing up, to a little higher level in terms of what I mentioned earlier about having a system that is independent of the app you're using. So in that system, you would want to maybe sketch out a layout of what a meeting notes template might look like. Then you get into the app and look for the features in that app that allow you to create templates. Many apps that you might use for this do have that capability, right? So there's the system, and then there's how we use the app to execute that system. The two need to be very distinct. The reason I think a lot of people struggle with these kinds of apps and how to use them is because they don't have that system defined, and you think that the app is the system, and that's where the confusion starts, because you start getting into it and you realize you have no idea how to structure any of this. The reason I have all this structure is because I have a system defined that's independent of the app, and then I just figured out how to use the app to execute based on that system. Okay. So let's go to clients. Okay, so I'm going to back up here to my firm's main kind of home page, right? This is like an internal page that I use. As you can see, I have everything here at my fingertips, and I can go into a clients page, and here I've got a list of all of my clients. And then from here, I'll drill into my own, because I don't mind showing you my own stuff. I certainly don't want to show you one of my clients' stuff, right? And over here, you'll see I've got an overall layout, but since we're focusing on notes, I'll focus over here on the right, where I've got what I call quick notes, right? This is just one view, and you can see I've got others here. I've got new notes. So these are defined based on the timing of when the note was created. And it's also defined based on, there's a status, I think, of inbox that's not shown here. And so this is just a quick view of notes that I've got. Again, in new notes, I'm looking at the recent ones. But I can click here to expand this. And now I've got a focused view of all of the notes that are specifically related to Nerd Enterprises as a client. Okay. And, and some of this is articles that I've clipped. I'm not really sure why the political ones are here. It's probably should go into, and I'll show you here how I can fix something like this very easily. That is more of a personal thing, so we're going to move that accordingly, right? And then while I'm here, I can just clean that up, okay? And that is it. That's how you can easily manage notes. So I get in here. These are the new ones. I'm going to check on my status here, because like I said, I'm pretty sure that is another criteria. So these are all already marked for quote-unquote follow-up, which may be the default, right? And if I click in here on the filters, I can show you. So this is, it says one rule, but it's what's called an advanced filter, so you can have multiple criteria with logic applied, right? So it's got to be assigned to Nerd Enterprises, because that's the client that we're in. The date is based on anything that was created after 1 week ago, so anything created within the past week. And also the responsible party is, of course, assigned to me, right? So these are new notes based on that criteria. Here are ideas. Okay, so this is, I get a fleeting thought, I get an idea. It could be an idea for an article I want to write. It could be an idea for a stream of revenue. It could be anything, right? Those go in here. Here are client meeting notes that I have that are not necessarily clients that I have created a separate area for whatever reason, right? This is read later stuff, notes I've added for that. Reference information. I created this one called reusable because it was just like kind of like a template that I knew I wanted to reuse, but it didn't need to be a template in the sense that I showed you earlier. Like this one called Get It is just sometimes I need to sketch out a quick list of stuff I need to purchase online or what have you. So I have it in reusable, so it's easy to find. As you can see, there's not a lot in here. And this, so that's the idea, is it's something I'm going to reuse. I'll list some things I need to get here. I'll get them, I'll take it out, and then it just stays in here. So once again, it's easy to find. I don't know why there's a date on this. Let's get rid of that. Okay, and then support would be notes that I take. At this point, they're all marked done. But if I have an open support ticket with a vendor or somebody, then that's where these notes go. Untagged is just my way. It's kind of a workflow thing. I generally want to make sure everything has a tag. You can see there's a lot of stuff in here. Not a whole lot, but there's stuff in here that doesn't have tags. So it's like a workflow. It's almost like when I have a spare 5 minutes, I might come in here and just start tagging things. And tags, of course, are another dimension that you can use to easily, sort of track down information. It's like tags in any system. You're all familiar with tags in various ways, I'm sure, where it's just like keywords that you associate with something so that you can easily find it later based on that tag. And then this view, again, just shows me everything, still just limited to where the client is Nerd Enterprises. And then here's a view I created that's filtered for only the tag internal meeting. So there's an example of how I use tags. I also now have the notebook, right? So I could have done it that way too, but this was from before I created notebooks. So it's based on a filter that says only show me anything that's Nerd Enterprises and has the tag internal meetings, right? So that's a pretty detailed walkthrough of what it looks like when we're in the client. Now let's take a look at a project. Okay, now I'm going to show you a specific kind of project that I've got an outline for, which is based on a course that I'm developing. Okay, so right now in development I have this course, Managing Bulletproof Accounts Payable with QuickBooks Online. Okay, it's in development, and here, based on this whole same system, I've got the layout that shows you, and of course we're focusing on notes here. And when I'm developing a course like this, which is a very robust course, mind you, then there are a lot of notes. Some notes are just global sort of course-related notes. Others are specific to lessons. Almost every lesson is going to get a video notes note where I make notes about what I want to make sure I cover in that lesson's video. And well before that, there's going to be the outline for the lesson. It goes in a note like this before I sort of commit it to the Google Doc, which is ultimately where I write the lessons and put in the screenshots and so on and so forth. I could do it, I could keep it all in Notion, but long story short, for a number of reasons, I prefer to have the final lessons written and maintained in Google Docs. Along those lines, I have this, which is a different database. It's not the notes database. It's a separate database just for bookmarks, right? Or what I call links and docs. As you can see, here are the links for the Google Docs for each of the lessons, right? And this is a global view, right? Here's the general course folder, and here's each lesson, the local Google Drive folder that I have. So this whole system allows me to put everything I need right at my fingertips, making it very, very easy to access. And then, for example, if I go into the lessons, each lesson kind of has its own sort of, view of all that same information, but limited to just the stuff for that lesson. So if I go into lesson 4 here, you can see I've got links and docs. Let me expand this for a minute. And I've got the lesson notes, right? In this case, I don't have any notes for this lesson. I'm guessing because it was just easy enough for me to write. I didn't really need to outline things too well in terms of showing how to set up a vendor in QuickBooks Online. Pretty simple, right? So let me show you a quick example of something where I might have had some more detailed information. I can see here that this one definitely has a lesson outline note. So let's open it up, okay? And here it happened to open up right into the lesson notes view. Notion is smart when you have like a condensed view like this here in what's called side peek. It will take those tabs that go across the top for the different views, and it just organizes them in a drop down like this. So here are the links and docs just for this lesson, and then here are the notes. In this case, I just have the one note with the lesson outline, items and categories in QuickBooks Online. So this is what a project looks like, and similarly a project will have all the notes that are just for that particular project. So projects, of course, in general can be associated with a client, and as I mentioned earlier, the notes within that project, if they are so unique and specific to that project that they won't be useful in any other way or in any other context, as far as at the client level, then I don't have to associate the note with a client. I can simply associate the note with that project and not have it assigned to a client. It's perfectly okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Okay, so we've covered notebooks, we've covered clients, projects. Now let's dive into the notes themselves. And with that, I'm going to go back to my master here. Or actually back over here, I've got it open. Let me just get that out of my way. Okay, so here is a page for all notes. You looked at it a few minutes ago with me, and I explained this is unfiltered. This is every note, everywhere, for everything, right? Notice my views across the top. I have, and this is all just, there's no like rhyme or reason to this other than this is my own logic for things that I want to keep track of the way that I want to keep track of them. So for example, daily, I have right now, this is brand new, something I created. It's based on a tag that says read daily. And it's a little reminder I got written out for that I used, and I make sure I read it every day to remind myself of what I need to focus on and why it's so important, right? Because like you, I'm prone to distractions, and sometimes I get frustrated about it. So this is something I did and set up to ensure that I would be better at staying focused. Okay, this view is just for the emails that I have clipped using my new extension. I wanted a view that was focused only on those emails because most of the emails that I'm saving, as I mentioned earlier, are a read later kind of thing. And notice they all have this tag for emails. Another way I can easily search them out and filter things based on that, right? Which is how this view is defined, where the tag contains emails. This is just the global notes list in table form instead of gallery form, which is what you're looking at here. So this is a little more visual. This, you could argue, is a little more functional. The main reason I wanted this was there might be cases where I'd want to multi-select things and, for example, assign tags across the board to all of them, or maybe even assign them all to the same notebook if they're new and don't have a notebook yet. Which brings me to this view, which is a workflow view I created because, again, this whole system is fairly new, which means I have a lot of notes that don't have a home yet in terms of a notebook. So I'm going through, and I have it kind of as a habit daily to spend, maybe 15 minutes a day just, pinging a few of these and clarifying. Like here's one that I obviously just clipped probably today, right? And so eat the frog to cure your to-do list blues. Okay, and if I look here, I know who this is. He is the author of a book that I have that I'm reading sort of on hold for now about flow. Okay, so in his case, I probably need to create a new notebook for him. So I'm going to leave it for now because I don't want to go through the process of creating a new notebook for you. That would be for another video on another day. Okay. But that's the idea, is if I was ready, if I had a notebook ready for this, I would click here, assign the notebook. And once I do that, for now, I'll put it into my productivity one, right? You'll notice it goes away. It disappeared because this view is configured to only show things where the notebook property is empty, right? And then I'll take it back out and it comes back in here. And that's what that is all about. So that's basically the rundown of how I organize notes and where I organize them and why, right? And real quick, just to kind of walk through a quick use case and give you something very concrete. So if I'm here in my clients page, I'm going to go into my own hub here for Nerd Enterprises. If I want to create a new note, I can do so right from here. I could choose the meeting agenda template. Let's say we're having an internal meeting. And I will now assign the notebook right away. Nerd Meetings Internal. You saw the kind of background here populate while I was doing that. Okay, the status might be in progress, as in it's either scheduled for someday soon or it's happening now. And there's other properties to fill out here. It by default comes in with the tag client meetings because I use the meeting agenda template. But here I would need to change this to internal, right? Internal meetings, if that's in fact what it was. And the beauty of this, by the way, is, I was in my Nerd Enterprises client, which is for my internal stuff. But if this were actually a meeting for a client, it doesn't matter. I could just as easily have come over here to client, and let me close that, and remove the client, right? And it's configured to hide it when it's empty. So I'm just going to click show all. And so now I could say, hey, let's assign this to WebGility, who is one of my clients. It's a company I do some work with, right? So from anywhere that I am, I can still create the thing I need and put it in the sort of box that I need it in, which again is great flexibility because I might be in a rush. I may have been in my own firm's page and I'm on the Zoom right now and I'm like, oh crap, I forgot to, create the meeting note, as I said earlier. So in a click, no matter where I am, very easy to create the note so I can capture everything. Remember what I said earlier, capture, then I can quickly clarify, this is actually a meeting with Webgility, not an internal meeting. This I would change back to client meetings, right? So you have to be careful when you click on it, it opens it. So this I would change back to client meetings for the notebook, right? So very quickly, as we're kind of, client meetings, there we go. And that's open, right? So I could quickly capture the information I need or get set up to clarify, what this is for, where it goes, what does it mean to me, those kinds of things. I can do this on the fly very easily from anywhere. So bigger picture, I have, as I mentioned earlier, a system I can trust, and the reason I can trust it is because it's very easy for me to retrieve information I need when I need it. So optimized for retrieval is the key to putting things in a system you can trust, right? So I come here to my home page every day first thing. This is what I open up. Okay, I've got my daily journal front and center. That's based on a whole different topic for another day. What this is and why it's here and why it's so important to me that it's central, because it's literally central to everything. Basically every day I document everything I do, every meeting I have in a journal. So that creates a timeline of things that I do and people I talk to and so on. And of course, all that gets linked out to the appropriate clients, notes, projects, what have you. So everything is connected in a neural network or a geometric system where it's very easy to kind of drill around and pivot from one thing to the next when I need to, right? So again, I've got my clients here. I can go straight into projects. This is a global view of all projects across all clients, right? Or as I showed you, I can go into a client and just like I have a specific area for the notes, there's a specific area there that I didn't show you where you could drill into that client's projects, in a click. So that is the bigger picture of the system that you're seeing. Incidentally, on my right, you'll see the list of all of the tasks that are assigned to me with the due date of today. Many of them have to do with this very article that I'm producing as I record this very video. So those will all go away by the time I'm finished today, because you wouldn't know this, but I can tell you that I know I have everything I need to get this thing up and ready and done, and I'll probably publish it in about 2 days from now. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. As always, I hope you found this useful and valuable. If you did and you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel and click that bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video. And of course, your comments, questions, feedback, always welcome. Just post them below. Let me know what you thought, what takeaways you had. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them. I love getting feedback from you, especially questions, because that's the way I can be most useful to you. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I hope you learned something here, had some fun along the way. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you in my galaxy.